Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. Joining us today is Mark Riggs from Pemberton. Mark's got a long agency career, more than 20 years, shifted into the agency coaching space and does consulting where he works with agencies on shifting from the RFP rat race to building organic growth of existing and new clients. Mark, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm real excited that, the topic we're going to dig into, and we'll see kind of organically where it goes. No scripts here, but it's a popular one. It's something that has come up a lot, and I think it's really important. We're recording this end of Q4-ish, 2023.
Yeah.
Agencies have seen a really weird shift in biz dev, net new business dev, I'll say, and even, closing and growing accounts. And that's your specialty, helping that. And so this will get in the ears early 2024 in Q1. And so it'd be interesting to see kind of the shift in how this happens. But how'd you get into what you're doing now and helping agencies, build out like recurring revenue models and account growth?
Yeah, it was a fortuitous bounce, really. I kind of walked away from the agency business in early 2018. I live in North Carolina.
Walked or ran?
Well, I walked. It was maybe a steady skip. I had been in the agency business for 23 years. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had spent most of that time traveling just about every week of my life, and so it just got to a point where it was a lot. And so I made a shift in priorities. But the summer of 2018, I get a call from a former colleague of mine, a woman named Ann Mayer. We had worked together at an agency called Taylor, and she had gone on to become the CFO of the Omnicom PR group. And she reached out and said, listen, some of our agencies we do great work, obviously. They're really good at the art of what they do, but a lot of our young executives or young people don't know how to grow business. Right? They don't know how to recognize opportunities or have those conversations. And so she asked me to come in and do like a lunch and learn on some of my philosophies that I have. And so I went in and shared some philosophies. And then afterwards, I got pulled aside by a gentleman named Brad McAfee. And Brad at the time was the global CEO of Porter Novelli. And so he's like, how'd you really do that? How'd you take small accounts and grow them into multi-million-dollar accounts? And we got into a conversation, and he was at the time was launching a program at Porter called Accelerator. And the idea was to collaborate with young executives and hear what they're hearing and see what they're seeing, et cetera, and see if we could find pathways to growth. And our main philosophy at Pemberton is solve, don't sell. I do believe we're in sales, right? We're selling ideas. We're selling all the time. But it's this idea that if I'm solving a client's problems, if I'm out in front of them like I truly should be, the business should take care of itself. So Porter hired me as a consultant to work with some young people. And I did. I worked with about 8 young people. I say young, AD, VP level people. And over the course of a quarter, and we uncovered almost $1 million in organic growth on all those accounts that they oversaw. And so I went to Brad and it's like, this could be a thing. I was like, I'm not helping Porter. I'm not helping you pitch against Edelman or, anybody else. I'm helping you grow what you already have. Would you care if I pitched this service to other agencies? And he told me to go for it. And so that's how Pemberton got started. And it was really interesting along the way that as I would pitch this idea to agency owners, and you've probably run into this, Steve, we're really good at organic growth. We already grow organically, right? Mm-hmm. And I finally learned to say, well, of course you do, because somewhere along the way you do great work, and great work gets you more work, right? But no one bats 1,000, right? And so I sat on a call with this professional services expert, And he was talking about the 5 main competitors to a professional service firm. And he said the number one competitor is your inaction, right? You're standing still, taking things for granted, not innovating, et cetera. And I was like, gosh, man, if I could calculate inaction, that might be the pain pill I need, because I felt like what I was giving people at the time was kind of a vitamin, right? Nice to have, but didn't need to have it, right? And so I developed the cost of inaction calculator you can find on the website, and we asked 4 questions. And what that calculator does is shows any agency, especially independently owned agencies, the small to mid-sized agencies that aspire to exit at some point, the owners aspire to exit. It shows them how many pieces of net new business they would have to win over that horizon to achieve their top line revenue goals. And it's an impossibility. You can't get there with net new business alone. You've got to teach people to expand revenue. And so our joke is, we're a society of liberal arts majors. Nobody knows how to rub 2 nickels together. And if you're really good at churning butter, people who know me have heard this a million times, but if you're really good at churning butter, they eventually put you in charge of all the butter churners. All right. And then it's all of a sudden you're responsible for all these business acumen things, AGI and need to bill and all, blah, blah, blah. And people's heads explode. So you see people either respond well and they go up or they go out. Right. So our idea is new business is everybody's business, but you can have an impact whether you're in the pitch or not. So let's teach people how to grow business in a responsible way. And that's what we do. So I actually don't like to think of it as coaching or training. We actually collaborate with those people on their business. So we get into it with them. We really get immersed in their accounts. And, but it's really just changing that muscle memory from being reactive to being proactive and having the confidence to have problem solving conversations. And the real key to the whole thing, the linchpin, is being able to communicate to your client the business benefit of that thing, right? Because you've been there, I've been there. We walk in and you say, hey, I got a big idea. I got a great idea. And all they hear is big money, right? But if I got an idea and I think here's the business benefit, it's going to help you sell more of what you sell or build your brand, whatever the objectives are, the KPIs are, they'll listen. They may not buy it every time, but they'll listen. And so that's really, that's what it's about, is finding those opportunities, because the beauty of the agency business is our clients' problems are never completely solved. There's always more to solve. So it's just looking at those things through a strategic lens and being able to have conversations that are meaningful to that client's business.
So can you kind of open up the cabinet of these workshops that you do or seminars, and what are some of the tactical things that you're kind of bestowing on these AEs or ADs, that day-to-day activities that would help them continue to nurture relationships or open conversations to new ideas, or things that they should be doing on a regular basis?
Yeah, there's a variety of things that we've developed over time, because a lot of this was just kind of innately in me, right? It's just kind of the way I thought and the way I operated. So as I went along and, every once in a great while, I would say something smart, and I was like, oh, that's a thing. I'm going to write that down. Right. But, I talked about solve, don't sell. But the other thing too is, in every agency setting I've ever been in, I've been told by my employers, you have to manage expectations, manage the client's expectations. But did you set any expectations? Right. Because what generally happens is you win a piece of business, whether it was an RFP or they solicited you, whatever came across a transom, you win that piece of business. You're so excited to have it. You jump right in. Emails start flying, the briefs start flying, let's get something signed so we can start billing. And what we never do is really talk about the way we work. Because when you don't talk about the way your agency works, you inherit the negative equity from their previous agency. Because all that client knows is you're an agency, you must be like every other agency. And if we're going to be in collaboration with one another, I think it's completely fair. Of course, they're going to express their expectations of us. They're paying us. But I think it's also fair of us to have expectations of them and communicating those expectations. So when it comes to having an organic growth strategy, it's really about the way you start with a client. Because I hear so much, from we're so focused on new business right now. We'll think about the organic piece later. I'm like, man, you are missing the boat. It starts the moment you win that piece of business. And, the other thing we talk a lot about is, and this might be a poor analogy, but it's be the doctor, not the waiter or waitress. And what I mean by that is oftentimes that new piece of business comes through the door and they say, hey, agency, I need A, B, and C. Oh, yeah, we do that. We can do that for you. I'll get you an estimate. And, we'll get ripping around. Great. New business just walked through the door, right? Well, you just took an order. And what the problem with that is ultimately you're going to end up being accountable for a plan you didn't write.
Yep.
So even if you perform very, very well, it may have not actually been what the business needed. It may not address the business imperative, right? So you can generate a ton of great results, but they may not actually have business impact, right? So I always tell the joke. I was like, listen, I don't walk into my doctor's office and say, hey, I think I need heart surgery. And he or she says, yeah, hop up on the table. We'll crack you open, right? It doesn't, they diagnose the problem, right? So when someone says, hey, I think I need A, B, and C, well, why do you need those things? Let's really talk about the business imperative. What is the business problem we're trying to solve or the opportunity we're trying to address? And if you can address that in a strategic way, the news, the content, the creative, all those things will fall out of that, right? Now you're in alignment. And we also want to talk about, hey, how do you and I work together? What are your likes and dislikes? What did you not like about your last agency? What did you like about your last agency? How do you get raises? How do you get promotions? How do you handle conflict? Because if you want me to be a consultant, we're probably going to have reasonable conflict. And I don't mean headbanging conflict, but differences of opinion, right? And I want to address all that because then I can go back once a quarter, once every half year with that client and say, work aside. How am I doing against how we agree we're going to work together? Where am I winning? Where am I losing? Right? And that losing question is so, so important. A long time ago, I read a case study. These numbers probably have changed, but it's always stuck with me, that 94% of clients say they're happy with their agencies right before they fire them. And 89% of those clients never complain. Right. So here we are supposed to be professional marketers, professional communicators.
Those are staggering numbers.
And we don't. Right. And so we don't talk about it's all good news. Status looks good. Results, everything's good until it's not. Right. But if you every once in a while sit down and say, hey, where are we winning? Where are we losing? What would you like to see more of? What would you like to see less of? And let them talk. Right. If you'll give a client a constructive environment to complain, they'll tell you what needs to be fixed. They'll tell you what they want more of. Right. But you've got to create an environment where you can allow them to constructively complain. Because I can't fix what I don't know needs to be fixed. And so those are some of just the main things. But the other tool that we've developed that seems to be most effective, and it's not rocket science, but we call it the product deployment map. So what we'll do with every agency is say, okay, I want you to list all your products and services. Just make a list. Okay. And the first part of that exercise is I want you to go down and highlight everything you're doing for this client. And they highlight all the things. So then my next question is, are you getting paid for all those things? Because most agencies, in my experience, I don't know about yours, Steve, but in my experience, they cannot write defensible scopes. Right. They're just open-ended, gaping things that, use dirty words like ongoing and as needed and those types of things. But they go through and they highlight all the things. And I say, well, listen, you are over-servicing with services, which is a byproduct becomes your over-service with time, right? And if I'm over-servicing to any degree, you do the math on any amortized revenue across 12 months and you're giving away work for free. You're working the last couple of months of the year for free. And so we point these things out and say, listen, we got to get paid for all these things that we're doing. But the B, of all these things that you're doing for the client, what problems are we solving for them? Like, how is this helping their business? Right. So if you can articulate that for me, you should also be able to articulate in the next column, what problems are we not currently solving for them? Do we have the tools in our toolbox to address those things for them? And can I articulate the business benefit of solving that problem? If I can do that, I'll have an educated conversation. So for us, that led to this, obviously we do an organic growth workshop. But we actually do a workshop on what we call operational scoping. So how do you write defensible, profitable scopes? And how does the account, what I would call client guidance, I don't like client service or client management, but client guidance, how do they work with operations or finance to ensure those things we're putting together something that's profitable for us, because we're here to make money, and that's okay. We shouldn't have to apologize for that, Right. So it's really, again, how you start, how you scope it, and are you creating an environment where everything's going to be incremental, and you've explained to the client in the beginning, this is how it's going to work. Right. And then the last thing I would throw at you is very basic things, but how do you present a budget? Mm-hmm. Right. I advocate for, take that same list of products and services, even if they're buying 2 of them. Right. And in their budget document, have all of those things, and then just fill in by the month what those 2 things are. All of our clients are also consumers. They understand the consumer paradigm. Right. So they understand menus. They understand. Right. So I need to make that work feel tangible, because strategy and ideas and creative and time, it's just pixie dust. Mm-hmm. So it's really easy for them to just say, hey, just work that in there. Just work that in there. Right. But if you can make them see that the work is it's a tangible item. I can't walk into Target with $100 and walk out with $300 worth of stuff. Why do they expect it from us? So I have to make the work feel tangible. But what I'm also doing is I'm leaving those other things they're not buying blank in the budget columns. Mm-hmm. I want them to see those are tangible products. If you want more of those, you have to pay for those things. And then 2, I also want them to ask, well, what are these other things? Why am I not getting that? That sounds interesting. And maybe it opens up a conversation. So you're solving the problem we've all heard. We got to present all of our capabilities. We got to get everything in front of them. I want them to know everything we do, right? Because they hired you for a specific thing. Well, just show it to them in the beginning. Just show everything to them. So that's where I think we come at it from a unique perspective. Is most people think about organic growth on the back end, or once they're in the throes of it, as opposed to being considerate and intentional about it in the beginning.
It's interesting because you covered a lot of ground there, but one of the things that really stuck with me is how you set the table at the launch. And I've always been kind of the mindset, maybe it's too fear driven, that, from day one, client is looking for a reason to replace you. And by setting the table and saying, here's how we work with agencies, you're just like any relationship, you're teaching them how to treat you and how you want to be treated and how success is driven. And whether it's, here's how quickly you can expect a return in an email, to here's who your account supervisor is, or, direct points of contact, or we don't work Fridays, or like whatever those understandings of the relationship are, setting that at the very beginning. But then the level of proactivity that needs to happen to make sure that from day one, they're not looking for a reason to fire you, but they're looking for a reason to give you more work. That last part you just said is huge. And I could remember vividly having, one of our biggest accounts. Oh, we just hired so-and-so to do this for us. Well, we do that. Oh, we didn't know that you did that. And that last phrase is the worst thing you never want to hear a client say, we didn't know you do that. Aren't you marketers? Like, how does somebody not know what you do? And I love the way you laid it out. Here's what your scope is. Here's what you're hiring us to do because we've diagnosed you. Here's your prognosis. Surgery's on Friday. I love that analogy. But we also do these other things, and kind of keeping it in the forefront of their mind that, like, we also do video production, even though you're not hiring us for it or whatever.
That's right.
So yeah, I think that's pretty valuable pointer. You like to point out, kind of running from RFPs. Do you feel that they are, maybe it's not a blanket answer, but waste of time, waste of energy? There's better ways to grow net new business. And in parallel, if you're growing your current business organically, you won't need to chase RFPs?
Yes and no. I mean, a little of that is branding, right? So if I'm being completely honest, net new business is important. It's super important. Filling the pipeline, it is super important. I'm not negating that at all, right? But what I am saying is generally, we've been taught this, that you have your hunters and your farmers. There's those people who love to win it, and then they throw it over the fence to the account team, and then they farm it, right? We're trying to bridge the gap a little bit here because, I'm so eager to win that piece of business. And it's just, that's the thing. And then once I get it in, it's almost like I take it for granted. Well, you've done the hard part. You've won the business, right? And I'm sure these numbers change all the time, but it used to be like the average client relationship was like 2.5 years. tops.
Yeah, I think it's
right. Like
a
let's have
fraction of that now.
long, fruitful. Yeah, let's have long, fruitful relationships. You've done the hard part. You've got it in house. Why are we not investing the same amount of energy and innovation and thought into building a piece of business as we do to win a piece of business? Right.
Yeah.
And it really illustrated for me. I had a former client of mine who asked, he said, it's always perplexed me how aggressive and creative agencies are in trying to win my business. He said, then I give them the business and it's like that you guys entrench into this fear and trepidation. Like you stop bringing it. He's like, when you stop bringing it, I got to go find somebody else. He said, by the time I go through the RFP process or go through the procurement, he said, it's a year from now. I want this to work. And that's where I learned. He said, if you'll keep bringing me ideas that are on strategy and have business benefit, I will always listen. He said, will I always buy? Nope. But again, batting 300 will get you in the Hall of Fame. Right. Yeah. And so I understand that new business is important. But when you look at statistical information, and it's funny, I've heard in the last 12 months, I've heard both sides of the coin. The incumbent is at a very high percentage is going to win. Right. Especially when it comes to state and government RFPs. And the opportunity to win new business is so low. Yeah. I'm not saying don't go after the new business, but let's be practical and intentional and strategic about onboarding the new client that we won and investing the same type of energy. I've really been perplexed lately, by the advent, not by AI, but things like AI and other tools that we use to do the work and the innovation that's happening there. But I don't see any innovation on the client services side.
Yeah.
We still do things the way we've done it for generations. And the way we've done it for generations is bend over backwards, make the client happy, give it away. Just get to the next thing. Right. And it's interesting to me. I read a study from the Sloan School at MIT, and it said that 1% of MIT's MBA grads go into marketing communication. 1%. Or all MBA grads, excuse me, 1%. Okay. That I think it was like 26% go into, consulting with the Bains and the McKinseys and the Boston consulting groups, right? And that 1% is we're not teaching our people the language of finance, accounting, and economics.
Yeah.
Right. We can't communicate to our client the business and why do you need to keep me when things are tough?
Yep.
Right. We're always the tertiary budget line item that they cut. When times get tough.
Economy's down, we're cutting marketing. Yeah.
Right. And it makes no sense. I mean, listen, there was a study done after that downturn in 2008 that, who did that? It'll come to me. But anyway, that the brands that just kept marketing on, even at a trickle, but continued to market through that downturn, they recovered 9 times faster.
Yeah. We saw the same thing
there's
in COVID.
Business benefit.
Yeah, we saw the same thing in COVID. How many agencies boomed that were not deeply niched in the sector that tanked, right? And the agencies that boomed were because clients remembered what happened in 2008, and brands remembered that if I get in front of people that are home and captive and whatever, like we'll get it back. And so I think lessons were learned there big time when we saw the world kind of shifting in COVID times. Yeah.
It's also interesting that go ahead, please.
Yeah. I want to shift gears and jump into a couple of rapid fire questions so we can stay on target. I like to keep it at 25. So these may or may not be agency related. They may or may not be personal or business related. But what's a new hobby, book, podcast, show, something that you just can't get enough of these days?
That's so fun. My wife and I watch a ton of British television.
Okay.
If it's not British, it's generally not on our television. This is going to sound really lame and boring, but there's a show called Escape to the Country. So my wife has made up her mind when we retire, we're going to live in the UK for at least a year. So we watch this show every every day, every other day. We watch a couple of episodes of Escape to the Country. And it's about, hey, I want to move out of the city and move into the country. So they're looking for homes. Right. So awesome. We're big into that. But my wife and I do a lot of antiquing. As I've gotten older and, we appreciate old things, but I got 3 teenage kids. So right now I got a senior in high school, a sophomore in high school, and an 8th grader. So a lot of our life surrounds their activities and getting to activities and, being the taxi service that, we all end up being sometimes. But, to me, the podcast that I'm getting the most value out of right now that I've been listening to besides yours is, Drew McClellan's, Build a Better Agency. Yep. There's always something valuable there. And, I really wasn't that familiar with Drew until probably 6 months ago. And a client of mine's like, have you ever met Drew? Right. You guys are so like-minded, and we met. And, of course I started listening to his stuff. And so that's really what I've been into lately.
Awesome. And finally, what's a really invaluable piece of business advice that you can share with the listeners?
Oh man. Start out like you can hold out. Start out like you can hold out. And what I mean by that is, define your ideal client, define the way you're going to do business, define these things in the beginning. So you have some principles to hold on to, because as an entrepreneur, the thing I've learned over the last 6 years, it can become a wild ride. Right. And sometimes it's going to be really fruitful. Sometimes it's going to be tough. And those moments when it gets tough, it gets really easy to start looking around for other things. Right. Yeah. But if you have that mission defined, you have the ideal client defined, you have, what you want to do and be about defined, you'll stay true to that, and it'll work out. The other thing I would say, especially in our culture right now, so many people are going out on their own and consulting, et cetera, is there are going to be lulls in the beginning. There's going to be moments when you're sitting on the couch watching SportsCenter in the morning. You're like, why am I not busy? Like, enjoy that, because it will pick up. And even if you think you want to be over the course of time, you will find your true niche and true thing, right? Because for me, it was going to be about new business and consulting and strategy. And it got really focused on this organic piece, because I realized that's what people needed. And there wasn't a lot of people out there talking about it. And so don't have patience, but be principled in your approach. So start out like you can hold out.
Love it. Mark, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate your sharing your experience and your wisdom with the listeners.
Man, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to talk to you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.